If you follow The Story Behind on social media, you may already know about the big news I'll be talking about in a minute. But in case you don't, there's a very special announcement I can't wait to tell you about. Luckily, I'm behind a microphone and I don't have to worry about bad breath, or as one advertisement for today's subject put it, the problem that never announces itself to the victim. It may sound scary, but one of the most fascinating things about today's episode is not just the creation of this everyday object, but the marketing tactic of presenting a problem that many people weren't concerned with until the solution was advertised. You're listening to The Story Behind, the extraordinary history of the ordinary. I'm your host, Emily Prokop, and this is The Story Behind Mouthwash. But first, an exciting message. The Story Behind has been nominated for a 2019 Webby Award for Best Series. There are actually 2 awards the show is up for. The Webby Award, which is decided on by the International Academy of Digital Arts and Sciences, and then there's the People's Voice Award, which is voted on by you. If you haven't yet, please be sure to vote. It's very quick and you just have to provide your name and an email address, and that's it. You may also get a prompt to tweet that you voted, and I am trying my hardest to respond to those tweets to thank those who've taken the time to do this. This is a huge honor for The Story Behind, and if you look at my fellow nominees, you'll see shows that are produced by teams of people from Serial, Gimlet, American Public Media, and Slate. The Story Behind is produced in my basement with a $60 microphone and is financially backed by listeners like you over on Patreon. I want to thank everyone who has already shared the link on social media and have encouraged friends, families, and followers to vote. And as of this recording, The Story Behind is in 4th place. The link to vote can be found in the show notes of this episode, which you can get to in most podcast apps by either clicking the screen or scrolling down. The link is also available over at thestorybehindpodcast.com or on Twitter and Instagram at storybehindpod and facebook.com/storybehindpod. I just want to make sure you can get that link. Be sure to vote. Thank you. Teeth cleaning has been important to civilization since ancient times. Mouthwash in particular is mentioned in Chinese, Greek, and Egyptian literature. But it was the Romans who wrote most about mouthwash back in 1 AD. Now, if you're squeamish, this might be a good time to fast forward so you don't find out exactly what was used. Okay, you still with me? The Romans would buy bottles of Portuguese urine as mouthwash. We actually talked about this in the episode, The Story Behind 30 Random Things. In fact, it was thought to whiten smiles. The thing is, it was effective. When urine decomposes, it turns into ammonia, which is great for taking out stains. Romans used both human and animal urine for this, and the Emperor Nero began taxing the trade. So you may think that was silly of people hundreds of years ago, but up through the 18th century, urine remained a key ingredient in making mouthwash. Now, if you've skipped ahead to avoid being grossed out, you might want to skip again, because in addition to urine, tortoise blood was also used with the thought that it would disinfect the mouth. I couldn't find much about why this was believed, but I did find out that in Chinese culture, turtle blood is thought to contain magical properties in general, and was used in the early 1990s by the women's long-distance runners for stamina. Okay, grossness over, I promise. Other common ingredients in the predecessors of the mouthwash we know today include olive juice, berries, myrrh, vinegar, cloves, wine, and mint leaves. St. Hildegard von Bingen began to popularize the act of swishing cold water around in one's mouth to clean it in the 12th century. In 1653, Antony von Leeuwenhoek was a textile merchant who was using a magnifying glass for cloth inspection. He then turned his attention to the magnifying glass itself and began grinding his own lenses for them. He built a simple microscope in 1671 and began studying microscopic organisms despite not having much of a background in science. The father of modern microbiology, as he came to be known, is credited for discovering oral bacteria and found he could immobilize and kill that bacteria with ammonia or alcohol. So the early Romans actually had the right idea when it came to cleaning the mouth with ammonia. But because of this new discovery, alcohol became the more popular ingredient in mouthwash. About 200 years later, Dr. Joseph Lister began performing operations in a sterilized room, setting a trend that reduced mortality rates in patients. The practice of sterilizing operating rooms and environments caught on. In 1879, inspired by the work of Dr. Lister, Dr. Joseph Lawrence created a formula that included eucalyptol, menthol, methyl salicylate, and thymol that could be used to clean mouths and sterilize wounds. By the way, those ingredients are actually fancy words for eucalyptus, mint, wintergreen, and thyme, although the exact formula is a trade secret. Lawrence named the formula Listerine in honor of Lister. Lambert Pharmaceutical Company bought the rights to the formula and began selling it in 1881. By the end of the century, dentists began recognizing Listerine as being an effective way to clean mouths and began prescribing it to patients. By 1914, it no longer required a prescription and was sold over the counter in the United States. One of my favorite parts of learning the story behind everyday objects is learning the marketing that made them so popular, and Listerine's marketing is no different. Even though Listerine was being sold as mouthwash over the counter, it was still considered an all-purpose antiseptic. George Lambert, who was the son of Lambert Pharmaceutical Company founder Jordan Wheat Lambert, decided to give Listerine a bit of a marketing edge and created a quote-unquote problem people didn't know they had. He combined the Latin word for breath, halitus, with the medical-sounding term osis to create the term halitosis. He created a marketing campaign that included ads like the one I'll be posting on the Story Behind Instagram page that starts off with, "If your husband or wife has halitosis," unpleasant breath, "it's your duty to call attention to it and suggest the effective remedy, Listerine." In order to test the effects of Listerine on bad breath, the ad also suggested rubbing a piece of onion on one's hand, then applying Listerine to show how it can combat powerful odors. I should note this isn't the first time bad breath was recognized, but the fear of having halitosis meant more bathrooms soon stocked Listerine and it became a household name. By the way, another version of this story says it was Gerard Lambert, not George, who had read the term halitosis in a medical journal, but most sources credit George with coming up with the term. Lambert Pharmaceutical merged with a number of companies over the years, and in 2000 was acquired by Pfizer. Nowadays, there are mouthwashes made for more than just bad breath, including ones that help with dry mouth and act as a saliva substitute. One thing I found interesting when I was researching the story behind the toothbrush was that humans have to take extra care of our teeth, compared with animals, and that's because our diet consists of more sugary and processed foods. If you found yourself very aware of your breath while listening to this podcast, I can relate and tell you that I brushed my teeth no less than 3 times while researching and writing this episode. Information for this episode was sourced from explorable.com, listerine.com, Mental Floss, and more links which can be found in the show notes, either in your podcast app or over at thestorybehindpodcast.com. This week on Trivia Tuesday in the Story Behind discussion group on Facebook, Adam posted the film Mac and Me was the first known major film with a disabled character in the lead role, played by a disabled actor. It was also never written to be a disabled character, and so there is no focus on it in the film. He is just a kid who happens to be in a wheelchair. Moxie posted rusty nails give you tetanus, not because of the rust or any other quality, but because they puncture your skin. You can also pick up the tetanus bacteria from the soil in your garden. Soil is also the route by which you're more likely to catch leprosy, unless you've been handling an armadillo. Their low body temperature makes them asymptomatic carriers. And Ryan posted, by the age of 40, your feet can increase by as much as half a shoe size as your feet flatten with body weight and the tendons and ligaments loosen and don't hold bones together as well. If you'd like to talk about trivia you pick up during the week and have it read on the show, join the Story Behind discussion group on Facebook. This episode was brought to you by the Story Behind executive producers who support the show through Patreon and who get access to the full scripts of these episodes before they even go live, and a bonus episode every month. If you'd like to support the show and become an executive producer, head over to patreon.com/thestorybehind. Thanks for listening. In 1879, inspired by the world of Dr. Lister... Inspired by the world? What? Work! I meant to say work. Dr. Joseph Lawrence... Wait, his name is Joey Lawrence. Dr. Joey Lawrence. Okay. St. Hildegard von Bingen. I love this name. St. Hildegard von Bingen began...